and the owner left it with Jim for a day to be repaired. Jim fixed it, then called up his cousin, a dead ringer for Hank Aaron, and told him to get over to the shop as fast as he could. He called the guys at the bar to let them know Hank Aaron was in his shop and coming over to sign autographs. When Jim's buddies saw Hank step out of that Rolls, they broke out in whoops and hollers. It wasn't till an hour into drinking that they guessed the truth, but by then it didn't much matter that they'd been had. As time went on, Jim's drinking began to adversely impact his physical health and his business. He was waking up in the morning with the shakes, already craving the time when he could take his first drink of the day. The shop was becoming disorganized and Jim more unreliable. After less than a decade, Jim was forced to sell the business for nothing more than parts. As he put it, "I drank the business away." He wasn't yet 30 years old. After losing his business, Jim took a job at his parents' yellow cab company, fixing the cabs that came in for repair. His drinking was unchanged, but the pressures of running a business were gone. As the owner's son, he got special treatment. No one commented if he showed up late or left early. By his own admission, "A lot of people covered for me, and I got away with doing a lot less work." Instead of repairing cars, he was spending most of his time at the Green Hills Country Club in Millbrae, where his father, a member, helped him get a membership of his own. As Jim describes the club, it was a bar with a golf course attached. Jim made a group of friends at the golf club, all of whom were heavy drinkers like himself. They'd play a round of golf together, and winners would buy drinks. Then losers would buy drinks, then chipmunks would buy drinks. At that time, neither Jim nor his many drinking buddies at the golf club would have identified themselves as having a drinking problem. As Jim moved into his early 40s, he no longer felt safe to drive himself home from the club. He'd been driving drunk for years, but had never felt unsafe before. Now, even he recognized that he was often too drunk to drive. He'd go around the golf club looking to bum a ride, but pretty soon his friends were making excuses not to drive him home. Jim managed to get home somehow, and once there, he'd collapse into bed in an alcohol-fueled haze. When he woke in the morning, he'd struggle to remember where his car was. Had he driven himself home, or had someone given him a ride? When he couldn't find his car parked on the street outside his house, he'd call up one of the drivers from the cab company to give him a ride to the club. He frequently found himself standing alone at 10 in the morning in a nearly empty parking lot next to his abandoned car. Jim was running out of friends. He was running out of money. Most importantly, alcohol just wasn't working for him the way it used to. He kept trying to recapture that peak experience when he was 22, traveling in the RV to play golf at the coast. But no matter what he drank, how much he drank, or who he drank with, he just couldn't recreate it. After nearly 25 years of regular, heavy use, drinking alcohol went from being a purely pleasurable experience for him to being something he did in solitary misery. Around the time Jim turned 47 years old, his closest buddy at the country club died of an alcohol-cocaine overdose. Jim, who had already begun to think seriously about quitting drinking, had new motivation. He didn't want to die. But how to stop? He couldn't imagine it. Across the street lived a man Jim affectionately called Larry the Limey. Larry was a British World War II Air Force veteran and a self-declared reformed drunk, actively involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA. One day Larry approached Jim and simply said, "Jim, there's a better way." He invited Jim to attend his all-male Wednesday night AA meeting, and Jim went. Jim instantly hated AA. "What am I doing here in this lonely dungeon of drunks when someone like me should be sitting on a bar stool at the Green Hills Country Club?" But despite Jim's aversion to affiliating with drunks and his sense that he wasn't one of them, he decided, as a kind of experiment, that he would go, just to see what it was like. Sometimes he showed up intoxicated, which was okay with the other men and consistent with AA membership requirements, which asks only that potential members come to meetings with the desire to stop drinking. To his surprise, Jim discovered that more Wednesdays than not, when he went to an AA meeting, he didn't drink. In between, he was still spending most of his time intoxicated. Jim became a fixture at Larry the Limey's all-male Wednesday night meetings, and when he turned 50, Jim decided to walk away from booze for good. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do, and AA made it possible.